Thinking about buying a home and wondering why one property works for your approval and the other one does not, even when the price is basically the same? This is one of the biggest things buyers do not understand until they are right in the middle of it, because a lot of people think mortgage approval is mostly about the sales price. It is not. You can look at two homes with the exact same offer price, and one gets approved while the other one pushes you over the line and kills the deal. Why? Because the real issue is not just the price, it is the payment, it is debt, it is taxes, it is insurance, it is HOA if there is one, and it's how all of this hits your DTI. So, in this video, I want to break down what DTI mortgage approval actually means, why buyers misunderstand it, and why something as simple as a different zip code can completely change whether a home works for you or not. Because this is one of those areas where people think they understand affordability, but they are still looking at it the wrong way. And by the way, if you want help thinking through your situation, there's a link in my bio. No pressure, just clarity. I'm Ivan Cano. I'm a realtor and a mortgage loan originator, so I get to see both sides of the deal. I see the actual home search, the contract side, the property side, and then I also see the financing side where the numbers either work or they do not. And this is one of those areas where buyers get tripped up all the time because on the surface it seems so simple. They think, I got approved, I know my price range, this home is around the same price as the last one, and so it should be fine. But that's not how it works in real life. In fact, I was just texting clients about this exact issue. We were looking at how one home in one zip code was not the same as another in this different zip code, even if the offer price was the same, simply because the property taxes push the total housing payment high enough to affect the DTI formula and move the deal past the point where I could get them approved. That is real life. And that is why generic advice fails, because the sales price is only part of the story. So let's start with the basics. DTI stands for debt to income ratio. That is the formula lenders use to measure how much of your gross monthly income is already committed to debt plus the proposed housing payment. And this is where people start getting confused because when a buyer says, how much house can I afford? What they usually mean is, what sales price can I buy? When a lender looks at the file, the question is closer to, what monthly obligation can this income support within program guidelines? That is a very different question. DTI is not mainly about the sticker price of the house, it is about the total monthly burden relative to income. So when you hear DTI, think monthly income, current minimum debt payments, proposed housing payment, and whether that total ratio stays inside acceptable limits. That's it. That is the game. And this is why I say affordability is a monthly payment, not just a purchase price, because DTI does not care what the home sounds like on paper, it cares what it costs every month. Now, let's talk about what actually goes into that housing payment because this is where people miss it. A lot of buyers think about principal, interest, maybe the interest rate, but that is not enough. The real housing payment can include the principal, the interest, property taxes, homeowners insurance, mortgage insurance if applicable, HOA dues if applicable, and any one of those or a combination can change the equation, especially property taxes, insurance, HOA in certain neighborhoods, and this is why two homes with the same price are not automatically equal. One property can have materially higher taxes, another can have higher insurance profile, another can have an HOA. Another may combine two or three of those at once. So now, what looked like the same house on paper, it's not the same house in the DTI formula. This is one of the biggest misconceptions I see. People think if I can afford a $300,000 house, then I can afford any $300,000 house. No, not necessarily, because one $300,000 house may produce a very different monthly payment than another one. And once the payment changes, the DTI changes. And once the DTI changes, the approval can change. This is where zip code issues become very real. Let's say a buyer is looking at two properties with the same sales price, same offer amount, same buyer, same rate environment, same loan program. A lot of people would assume the approval results should be basically the same. But then one property is in an area with materially higher property taxes. Now the monthly tax portion of the payment rises. That means the total housing payment rises. That means the DTI rises. And now maybe the file that was already a little too tight becomes too tight. So what changed? Not the buyer, not the income, not the debt, and not the sales price. What changed was the carrying cost of that property. That is huge because it means approval is not just about what you want to offer, it is about what the specific property does to the monthly payment. And once a buyer starts to understand that, they stop thinking at and looking at the home as a whole story and start looking at the full structure. That is a much smarter way to buy. The biggest mistake buyers make with DTI is this: they treat the pre approval amount like a target instead of a boundary. They think if I'm approved up to this number, then I should shop around there. But the approval ceiling is not the strategy. In many cases, it is exactly where people can get themselves into trouble. Because if your file only works comfortably under a certain payment level, and then you add higher taxes, insurance differences, HOA, mortgage insurance, existing debt load, you can move from technically possible to does not work faster than you think. And even if technically still works, that does not automatically mean it puts you in a good position after closing. That is the other side people forget, because getting approved is one thing. Being in a smart position after you buy is something totally different. I talk about this all the time. The real question is not just what you can do to get approved for. The real question is, what position do you want to be in after the transaction is done? That is a much smarter question. This is where I want to go a little deeper, because DTI is not only a lender formula, it is also a warning sign. What I mean by this is this: even if I can structure something to technically get an approval, that does not automatically mean that the payment is a wise choice for your life. And that matters, because there are plenty of people who can get approved at a level that leaves them too tight every month, with little to no reserves, with too much stress after closing, and no margin when life happens. So DTI matters in two ways. First, it matters because it affects whether the lender can approve the file. And second, it matters because it gives you a window into whether that payment even makes sense for you. And those are not always the same thing. This is why I keep saying approval is not the strategy. The strategy is structuring the purchase around your actual life, your comfort, your monthly reality, your reserves, and your flexibility and goals. Because some people do not need the max house, they need the right house in the right position. That is a very different mindset. And if you want help thinking through your situation, there's a link in my bio. No pressure, just clarity. This is also why generic mortgage advice fails so often. Two buyers can look at the same exact house and topic, DTI, affordability, down payment, even approval amount, and need two different strategies. One buyer may have strong income but high existing debt. Another may have low debt but tight cash reserves. Another may have good income, but the taxes in the area they want are materially higher. Another may be using a program where one structure just works better than another. So if someone online says, just stay under this, just buy at that, just put more money down, just avoid this type of payment, that is usually incomplete advice, because the right move is situational. And DTI is one of the clearest examples of that. It is not only about whether the ratio passes, it is about what is driving the ratio. Is it car payments, credit card minimums, student loans, taxes, HOA, insurance, rate, too much house, the wrong structure? That is how you diagnose it correctly, not with a slogan, with actual numbers. So, what should buyers actually do? First, stop asking only, what price range am I approved for? Start asking, What monthly payment range works for me, and how sensitive is that range to taxes, insurance, HOAs, and my existing debt? That is a much better question. Second, understand that the property matters, not just the offer price, the actual property. It's the taxes, it's the insurance profile, the HOA, it's the total monthly burden. Third, do not assume two similarly priced homes mean the same approval result. They do not. Fourth, stop thinking about DTI as some random lender hurdle. Think of it as one of the clearest ways to understand your real affordability. Because if your home pushes your housing payment high enough that the ratio breaks, it is telling you something important. Even if it still passes, the question remains, does this put you where you want to be after closing? That's the biggest conversation. So here's a better way to think about this. If your priority is simply chasing the highest approval amount, then DTI is probably going to feel like an obstacle. But if your priority is buying smart, protecting your monthly life, and understanding what actually works for your current situation, then DTI becomes useful. It becomes a lens. It helps you see the difference between price and payment, the difference between approval and strategy, and the difference between possible and wise. And that is the whole point, because one house is not the same as another just because the sales price matches. One zip code is not the same as another just because the list price looks similar. One payment is not the same as another just because the home price sounds close. The math underneath the deal matters. So if you are thinking about buying and trying to understand what you can actually afford, do not just focus on the sales price. Look at the full monthly picture, look at the DTI impact, look at the property specific cost, and most importantly, look at what kind of position you want to be in after the purchase is done. That is how you buy smarter. If you want help thinking through your situation, there's a link in my bio. As always, no pressure, just clarity.